On the show this week is Alex Demczak, co-author of the remarkable book, The Sale. If you're in sales, you're in business, you're an entrepreneur, you want to grab a copy of this book, I can assure you, it is all about how to sell more, how to sell with intention, and how to build a sales business based on a rock solid foundation. In this conversation, we talk about integrity. We talk about faith. We talk about speaking, writing books. If you're someone that wants to understand how to write a book and the process you go through, Alex can help you with that. But also we talked about how do you deal with challenges when things don't go your way, when maybe your biggest dream is not realized and you have to pivot. You have to understand how the beauty of the situation that you're in currently can actually create what it is today. Alex's example is that he was a quarterback for the Missouri Tigers and he got cut from the team. This was his dream. This was his mission. This football was everything to him, and he got cut and he became an assistant coach, but not even how you'd imagine an assistant coach to be. He was working for free. And so it humbled him and it showed him how people treat you with grace and with humility when you're in that position, and how he could then apply that to leadership and how he could then apply that to business and teams. And he actually had the time to write his first book in this time. So that was the beauty in the situation. And so he even says on the podcast, he's not sure we would even be talking on this podcast if that experience hadn't happened. And it changed his whole life, right? It gave a point that he could look back on in time and he could learn these skills about how to be human, how to have integrity, how to treat people. Then he went into business. And again, he was hustling to get the big deal, the big sale. This is what this book's all about, getting the big sale, going after the big sale. And the trouble is well, what do you do? If you're all in on going after the big sale, maybe you're neglecting time with your family. How do you balance all of your responsibilities? This will appeal to lots of you out there that I know in this audience have big families, have sales, have responsibilities, have targets, have quotas, have dreams, have visions. And yet you're trying to do all of these things and you think that what you're going after, the big sale, the money, if I could just land that client, is what's missing. But actually, what Alex's story and what the sale is all about is actually following your deeper purpose and having integrity when you're doing sales, when you're in business, maintaining that integrity and doing what is right. And when you lead with that, you can change the world and more doors will open than you could ever possibly imagine. Your reputation will go through the roof. You will sell more and you will be the role model and the example to those around you, and you'll have more time with your family. So this episode is a really, really special one. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Alex. It goes deep and it comes from my heart and it comes from his, and I know that we put a lot into this. So really enjoy it, but it's one for the books. It's one to bookmark and to listen to again and again. So thank you very much, Alex. Take it away. Okay, Alex Demczak, welcome to the show.
Tim, thanks so much for having me. I've heard amazing things about your podcast, so it's an honor for me to be here, man.
No, totally. The pleasure is all mine, and it's an honor for me to have you. And I'm humbled by having the author or the co-author of The Sale on the show. It's a book that resonated deeply with me, having worked in sales for a long time in my career, but also just understanding the message that you have behind it. And I can't wait to jump into that. I'd also love to touch on your journey so far in life and maybe highlight some of the lessons that you've learned along the way, if that's okay.
Yeah, man. Thanks for giving me this platform to share. And I think honestly, the reason I'm here today, the reason I'm on this show is because of something that happened to me when I was in college. And so, like maybe many of your listeners, I grew up a sports fanatic. I loved sports. And so football was it for me, American football. And I loved. I remember in high school, my grandpa said, son, you should be so focused. I didn't even date girls when I was in high school. I was that focused, and I was like, all right, grandpa, and so, I remember dating one girl my freshman year. I made an exception, but other than that, I was focused, and I just loved football, and I had the chance to walk on at the University of Missouri, and and life was good at Mizzou. I have the jersey here behind me. Life was good. But going into my junior season, where I thought I was playing at a high level, things were going great. I walk into this meeting room and there's these coaches sitting in there. And, usually this meeting is very chill. Like you
Mm.
show up, it's no big deal. But I sit down at this meeting room across from these coaches. And one of the coaches, as I'm sitting down, he's actually closing the door behind him. So I'm like, well, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but this is not a good start to the meeting. And so he looks right across the table from me and he says, Alex, we have over scholarshiped at quarterback. We are bringing in someone to take your spot. And yeah, at that point in my life, man, like football was my identity. That's who I was. Alex, the quarterback, Alex, the football player. Like if I had a bad practice, like my night was ruined. Like that's who I was. Like that was, like the jersey defined me in so many ways. And so when he told me that, essentially what he was saying is, you are not good enough. Like you're not good enough. You do not measure up. And he said, you have two options. Option number one is you're cut. Thank you, but no thank you. And option number two is you can stay on as this volunteer assistant, no pay coach. We could use you. And he's like, by the way, you need to decide right now in this meeting what you want to do. And so,
Whoa.
yeah, Tim, as you can imagine, my mind's spinning. I'm like, what do I do? And I just felt in that moment, I felt compelled to stay on as this coach. And so I remember walking out. I said, I guess I'll stay on as a coach. And he's like, all right. He shook my hand, walked me out. I remember walking past the person who took my spot, which that was hard. He was excited. I wasn't. I remember going out to my truck and just parking. And I remember just honestly just letting loose, just crying, feeling so humiliated, feeling like, I was this kid from a smaller town, had all these big dreams, and like, this is where the story ended for me. And all this build up to then this. And so honestly, it was like the biggest trial of my life. And it was the biggest time where I had to go through this of like, who am I? What is my purpose? Why am I here? And so leading up to the first practice in a few weeks, I show up thinking I'm going to have this big coaching role on the team, like they're going to give me the free gear, hook me up with all this stuff. And I was only a junior in college at the time. Right. And so I had big dreams, I guess, but I show up and I'm like, man, I wonder what I'm going to get to do, being part of the coaching staff, and one of these assistant coaches, he kind of, doesn't yell at me, but he kind of is like, hey, Alex, come here. I want to show you what your job's going to be. And he hands me this yellow flag. And for your people watching on YouTube, they can see it, but it's just like a yellow flag that a ref would throw. And he said, Alex, what we need you to do in practice is when someone jumps off sides and they commit a penalty, we need you to take this flag, and your listeners can't see this, but literally throw it on the ground and then go pick it up. And Tim, the worst part about it is he actually demonstrated how to do it twice. And I was like,
yeah.
Really, bro? I didn't catch it the first time,
Yeah.
Long story short, man, I went from being an SEC quarterback to a professional flag thrower for my entire junior season. It was like the hardest year of my life. I'm literally making coffee for the coaches, printing off copies, doing all these things. I don't feel seen during that time. I feel like all my best friends are living out their dreams, and like here I am doing these like menial tasks. And man, I'll just say like some really cool things started to happen that junior season. Number one, the humility of the situation of being brought so low. Like I still have relationships to this day with guys who are in the NFL that, would say little things to me during that time. Like, man, like I see you, like, thanks for sticking with it. Like, stay with it. And like, they didn't know it at the time, but those little comments like got me through like weeks at a time. And, started working on my first book during that time. I had a little bit more time. And long story short, I continued to work out with the team my junior year, knowing that I wanted to get back on the team my senior year. Met with the coaches, said, what can I do to get back on the team? Full circle, I made it back my senior year. We went to the Citrus Bowl. We beat Minnesota. It was a great experience. But Tim, the reason I start with that story for your listeners is that it's not really about football. It's about leadership and self-leadership. I had to learn for the first time in my life that I need to, take ownership of my actions, my beliefs, my thoughts, but also I need to understand that leadership requires no title. Like being excellent at what you do, whether it's sales or leadership, or you're the CEO of a company, I don't care what you do, or maybe you just graduated college and you're looking, what do I do with my life? It doesn't matter your title or position, but what matters is how you show up and are excellent every single day. And so, man, that's why I'm excited to talk with you today, because I feel like some of those principles that I had to learn the hard way have transitioned directly into sales, leadership, and business. Man, I know you know those principles as well in your own life. And man, I think that's why I'm here today. I don't think we would be talking today if it
Mm.
wasn't for me going through that trial in my life. And so that's my encouragement, man, to your listeners, is you never know how you'll be used from those trials in your life.
That's massive, and that's such a strong start to the show. So I'm really thankful for you sharing that. It is interesting, like how some of the hardest trials are the biggest blessings, and like actually, like you said, you got to write your first book because you were able to have that extra time that you wouldn't have chosen. You wouldn't have chosen that. You got to see through the lens of someone who had almost gone from essentially the top, the quarterback position for the Missouri Tigers to what is now essentially a flag thrower or tower from, like as you put it. And yeah, you're seeing guys who are showing you respect and humility and some of those lessons and those attributes, and that would have hit you. And at the same time, yeah, like you said, it's the hardest year of your life, and at the same time, these are the lessons that build the foundation of the rest of your life, right?
Man, that's so true. You said it in a great way, but it's like in that moment, you don't really see it. All you see is like what's right
Right.
in front of you. And you're just like, oh man, like, why this way? And, if there was a million different ways I could script my story, like this wouldn't be the way,
Mm.
but a quote that I've really, during that time had to resonate with, I still try to live by it today. The quote is this: comparison is the thief of joy. And
Yeah.
compare, maybe use that one too. Comparison is the thief of joy. And I think, you know every moment that we spend comparing our lives to others, we are literally robbing ourselves of joy. And man, it's like during that time it was so easy for me to look around at other people and say, man, why can't I have that? And now in business, years later, it's the same thing. If I'm not careful, it's like, oh, I can look on social media and say, well, look at Tim over here, he's doing these books and speaking, why can't I be like him? And it's so easy for us to do that. But I think the more we can focus on the what we've been given, the platform we have, whether that's you're a teacher for a school of 20 kids or you get to speak in front of thousands, it doesn't matter. It's we are blessed to be a blessing. And I think the more we can lead with that, man, and have that front and center, it just changes the way we work. Like recently, I was a few weeks ago, I was at a speaking engagement and I had to be in an airport for 12 hours, and then a few weeks before that, I actually had to sleep in an airport, and you've probably
Oh,
had to do these things too, and it's kind of like your badge of honor you earn as a speaker, right? But it's like, man, it's like when I have the mindset of, oh man, this is a bummer, I'm going to be in the airport for 12 hours today. Yeah, like I don't have a very good attitude, but when I'm like, you know what, I'm blessed to be to be a blessing in someone's life, whether that's in the airport or at the speaking engagement, it definitely changes your perspective, man, because you're like, you know what, I need to put away my own personal comfort. And it's like, how can I just make others around me better, encourage maybe one person? Maybe the whole reason for me going to the speaking engagement was a conversation that I'm going to have with someone while I'm sitting in an airport and I can encourage them. I don't know, but it's not really up to me to know. It is up to me to show up and be excellent, and be giving and be thoughtful and loving and encouraging in every circumstance. And here's the secret: I don't do it perfectly. Probably none of us do. But I think it's like, how can you as a leader get back in that mindset of like, I'm on mission. Here is my mission, and here's what I want to set out to do. And I want to keep that vision front and center. So when times are tough, man, I can overcome those things.
huge, huge, brother. You hit it. You just hit it. Especially the comparison is the thief of joy piece as well. Like that shows up, I think, at all levels, and you just have to be able to manage yourself. And it's that self-awareness piece and knowing when you're. Like, it happens to me. Like I'll compare myself to things that I don't yet have, or things that in the past I haven't had, and I'm like, I want to have had that, like that relationship with that family member or whatever it is, to then compare, and then you start dragging yourself down. And how, okay, I guess to step back a little bit, how long did it take you from the moment of being in that room and having what you thought was going to be your future with football, and then the opportunity to be an assistant coach, and then you thought again the role was going to be bigger than it was, and then you showed up and then it wasn't? How long did it take you to kind of get the beauty in the situation?
And it took a while. I mean, to be honest, when the situation was first happening and I essentially got cut from the team, there was a lot of like, I think, shame that I carried with me. And honestly, I'd be walking on campus and someone would say, "Hey, Alex, how's football going? How's the team looking?" Whatever. And I would just have this like, now I have to explain to this person I got cut from the team. Like that is not
Yeah.
a fun. That's not fun. And so honestly, man, like it was probably a year. I mean, people knew about the situation, but even just like once I finished playing out, I kind of didn't want to tell that story because it was easier for me just to say, well, I played at Mizzou in college, like to have to dig up that story is kind of like takes vulnerability. But here's the
Mhm.
cool thing though. It's like, man, when I lead with that story, and just as an example, just like you have the chance to speak at all these awesome companies. Like when I go out to speak at a company or school, and I'll talk for an hour, sometimes two, sometimes even longer, just depends. But it's like a lot of times when people walk up to me afterwards and talk to me, a lot of it revolves around, wow, like the story that you shared about being cut, like here's my story of how that's happened to me. And like and you just get to hear these awesome conversations. It like opens up these like channels for dialogue and conversation that like if I would have just got up at this speaking engagement and been like, you know what, guys, I have it all together, then like that, one, that's not true. Two, like no one wants to hear anyone talk about that. But I think a quote that I also love that applies to what we're saying is, people are impressed by your highlights, but they resonate with your weaknesses. And I think, man, at times it's hard to lead with your weakness in that way. It's hard to put it all out there. But man, I've just seen in my own life, whether it's sales, leadership, coaching, whatever we're talking about, there's so many parallels. Like when you lead with that vulnerability, when you lead with your weakness first, it's just crazy to see the vulnerability, the trust that's built, the relationships that are built through it. And man, like truthfully, I don't know if I'd be on this podcast with you today, because I don't know if I would have pursued the work I am today if I wouldn't have gone through that really hard time in my life. So man, it took a while, but now just like looking back, it's like, wow, it's pretty cool to see just how all these things line up in that way, man. So yeah, it's still a work in
That's
progress,
awesome.
but I'm, yeah, learning to lead with that, man, and not be ashamed of kind of what I've been through in that way.
That's so awesome. I mean, even for people listening now, like they can grab onto that and then use that in their talks that they're giving to their company. If they've got meetings with their team, like it builds that connection, right? They resonate and people can see the authenticity in that. When you're leading with your weaker moments or your vulnerabilities, it's actually something that people can grab onto more than what you would think. Like you were saying, like if you just rock up and you're like, yeah, we've got this sorted, this sorted, this sorted, bank balance is massive, and all of these different things,
Right.
it just doesn't have the same effect, and nor should it, right? Yes, people can like those accolades and they can aspire to want to do that, but it's better to talk about the rocky road and the challenges that you overcame
Right.
to get there, right? That's the meat on the bones, so to say. So like, let's not beat around the bush here. You are a top keynote speaker. You're an amazing author. You co-authored The Sale with John Gordon. You are a trainer for a lot of his companies and works, and you go out and you train massive companies, big sports teams, businesses. You are all around transforming high performance and leaders. Like, I know that you've been called on this mission. I know that's why we're sat here talking today, but the book you've written, and you came to John with that idea for the book, like you mapped this book out, you threw your heart and soul into that. Where did that story come from for The Sale?
Man, that's a great question. As a person of faith, I really do think God put it on my heart, if I'm being totally transparent and honest, because I think I couldn't have come up with myself. But just for your listeners, it's a business fable called The Sale.
Hmm.
And it's the main character named Matt. He's a sales rep. Yeah, like you read about in the book. He's a guy that's having a lot of success at work. Things are going great, making a lot of money, but at home not so good. He has two kids, and his wife's name is Kendra. And his wife pretty much approaches him and says, "Look, something needs to change. Like I'm not raising these kids alone. I didn't sign up for this. Like if you don't change, like we are going to change. Like I'm getting a divorce." And there's this whole kind of drama going on that you read about. And his response, which is pretty not a great response that I would recommend to anyone to say to their spouse, he says, she essentially says, "You need to provide." And he says, "Provide? Like I make more money in 1 month than the average person does in a year. Like what do you mean provide? Like, that's his
Mhm.
response. And
Mhm.
so there's this family drama, but a thing at work, things are going great. And so as you read about in the book, Matt has the chance to make the sale of a lifetime, and something he's been working on for years. And this sale would actually, he's in a very lucrative industry. This sale would actually bring him a commission of $7 million. And so he works for Turnbow Technologies, which is a company that they sell these parts for engines for airplanes. And so, as you know, if you've seen on the news, like, obviously having parts for airplanes, like, there needs to be integrity in those, the way they're constructed. If not, it can be pretty fatal in a lot of cases. And so he has the chance to make this sale that would bring him $7 million, which, Tim, I don't know about you, you know, to you,
Life changing.
$7 million, $7 million might not be much for you, but it is for me. So,
Life changing.
um,
Yeah.
but he has a chance to make this sale. But as you read about, the only problem is, to move forward with the sale, he would have to lack integrity in some pretty major ways. And honestly, he wouldn't even have to be the one doing the illegal act. He would just know that it's happening, right? He would be the one that's kind of overseeing it, turning a blind eye. And so, kind of the pinnacle of the story in the book is, does he make the sale and make all this money, and then he can be with his family more? He's starting to rationalize why he should do it, right? Just like all of us, sometimes when there's decisions in life where we think, "Ooh, I should do that." Maybe it's not the best decision, but you start rationalizing, you start making decisions quicker, more emotionally, right? Or does he do the right thing and walk away from the sale knowing that he could lose the client? And so while your listeners are on the edge of their seat, listen to the podcast right now, I can't tell them because they have to go read the book. But, there's some really cool principles that his mentor, Randy, who he meets, ends up teaching him about integrity and building trust. And what does it look like to lead in a way that when you look back years from now, you're proud of? And I think, man, that's the core and the heartbeat of the book is, how can you have success at work and at home? How can you, live in a way and perform in a way that, man, like, when your head hits the pillow at night, you're content. You're content with the work you've done, with the work you're doing. And you don't have to worry about, like, man, I really screwed that person over there in a negative way, or I really, you know, had this bad business dealing or whatever. It's like, you don't have to deal with those things because you're honest, you're true. None of us are perfect, but man, when you kind of abide by and live some of these principles, man, it's really cool to see the long-term trajectory of your career and your life in that way. So that's the message of the book. And so, yeah, you have the chance to speak with a lot of sales teams, schools, organizations on
Mm.
those principles. And it's just cool to see, man, like, how many, I mean, every industry, every team deals with integrity, building trust. And so it's really cool to be able to share these messages with, I had the chance to speak at the it was the Space Force one day. And the next week I was speaking in a barn to a group of farmers. So it's like, you just never know. You
Yeah,
never know who you
that's
get to
awesome.
share it with. It's like, man, the principles still apply. So yeah, man, that's the message of the sale.
And I love the way you've set it up because it starts off with there's a dynamic where it's the grandfather that's the CEO of the company. He's looking for a successor. I love the
Yep.
fact that Matt has a brother who's made a ton of money and is living this life that he would like to be living. So there's that comparison element running
Yep.
through Matt's life. And then what I really love, or don't love it, but I love how you handle it, is that there's a part in the book where Matt lets his son down. He makes a promise to his son that he'll be at the game, and
Yep.
he's basically married to his work. So his family, whilst he would say they're the top priority, through his actions they're not. And so he doesn't show up to the game. And like you said, Kendra points out that this isn't going well. Like this is going to go one way or the other, and it's going to be with them or not. So you've got to sort this out. But I think there's a piece here because subtly in that, and people really need to go get the book and read it, because subtly in that, Matt's thinking at that time is, I'm providing, I am setting you up with this lifestyle, and I'm the one sacrificing here. I would love to be at the game, but I can't because I've got business to do, and I want to just get a couple of big deals. So we're chasing the big deal that obviously then in the future, $7 million is a lot to be chasing. How does someone get multi-dimensional success? And what I mean by that is, how do they also not lose the family? How does that become a part of it? How do they have a family and multi-dimensional success? How does that go together?
Man, that's such a great question. Yeah, thanks for just reading the book, and clearly, yeah, I can tell you've read it. So thanks for doing that,
Yeah,
man.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that means a lot. So, I would say a quick story about me. So I was in sales for about 5 years in the mortgage industry. You know, the last few years
Mm.
have been a great time to be in the mortgage industry. So things were awesome. Was comfortable. Things were going great. But on the side, I was doing speaking engagements. So back in 2018 was my first ever like official speaking engagement. And then every year I would do more and more speaking each year. So for 4.5 years, almost five, I worked at this awesome mortgage company and did speaking on the side, right? So I was kind of like
Yeah.
living two lives. And around September of 2021, I started to get these heart palpitations. So I would wake up in the morning, wasn't even thinking about anything, but I was just like stressed. I could just tell. And so talked to my wife about it. We're like, I'm gonna go get it checked out at the doctor. They do an EKG. They're like, everything looks fine. And they said, he's like, what are you doing for work? And I named like the 8 things I was trying to juggle. And he was like, that's your problem. He said,
Mhm.
you're working too hard. You're stressing yourself out. He said, if you don't scale this back, it will scale you back. And, you know, I'm 30 now. I was 29 at the time. And I remember just like hearing that and being like, whoa, like, I'm only 29 and I'm being told this by this doctor. And so in December of 2021, long story short, I ended up quitting my full-time job,
Mhm.
going all in on speaking, writing books, and kind of what I believe in doing. And so to answer your question, I think it took me like some time of prayer, asking people, mentors, really getting specific on, okay, what do I feel like I'm called to do? What do I feel like the work that I should be focused on is? And I need to almost remove everything else that's not that. Because for me, it's like, obviously, my family needs to come before my work. But for that to happen, I can't have so much work that I can't give my family time, right?
Right.
And so it's kind of simple math when you break it down like that. And so for me, it was like, if I'm thinking about juggling 5 tennis balls, it's like, how do I remove like 2 of them to make room for what I've been doing? And so what's so cool, man, is like, you know, going all in, being not self-employed now. There was obviously risks in doing that. There was, you know, but
Because
what's
that's
really
quite
cool,
scary, right? Like that's a
yeah,
big deal. Like actually
yeah,
saying, talking about it, like going, hey, yeah, let's go all in. Let's be a keynote speaker. Let's back ourselves to go and be a trainer. Let's go and do that. But like you're giving up a lot when you're doing well in business, and there's protections there through like health insurance and
yeah,
whatever other stuff that's there. That's kind of like not the golden handcuffs, but there are things there, and there's I feel
sure,
like it's a huge difference between people saying it and then actually doing it and feeling that fear. Like it's very
dude.
different.
So true. And I remember being like employed in corporate America, and you'd hear so many people say, "Oh, I hate my job. You know, I'm ready to quit." But like you said, so many of them never did. They just showed up at work day after day and just would complain and not do well in the sales numbers and, you know, all of that. And
Right.
so what's so cool was leading up to that time, I was very intentional. And this would be my advice for anyone who's listening, who's like, I'm looking for that next thing. I met with and I just had phone calls with 12 different people in my life, 12 people, whether it's family members, full-time authors, full-time speakers, people in the mortgage industry that I was in. Like I wanted to ask everybody. I gave them my financial numbers. I said, look, here's where I'm at. Here's where I want to go. Here's what I ultimately see myself doing. I want to hear your advice. And what's really cool, man, is like 12 out of the 12 people that I talked with, friends, family, people who I knew would tell me and be honest with me and
Mm-hmm.
tell me the truth. 12 out of the 12 people essentially said in a roundabout way, to kind of, you know, overall quote what they said. They pretty much said, it's a no brainer. Like if you don't make this jump and try to pursue this, you're going to always wonder. You're going to always look back and say, man, I wish I would have, or what could it have been since I did that? And so, man, that was huge. And then just to say a year and a half later of kind of doing this, man, I should have done it earlier. I should have done it earlier because, man, I remember the last time walking out of the corporate America, like literally just walking out of the doors, looking down at the floor mat. It was a great company. It was awesome. I have so many friends that work there. But man, when I walked out of that room for the last time, there was like this instant clarity that just went off of like, all right, it's go time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so then I approached what I was doing differently. And man, I'm telling you, it cleared up so much bandwidth, so much clarity. I can now, when I go speak or whatever I'm doing, I can be all there. I can be more present. And so, man, for people who are looking to make that kind of jump, yes, there's risks. Yes, it can be scary, but man, in my opinion, it's so worth it.
So double down on mission. That's what we're saying. Double down on purpose.
double down on purpose, man, because I feel like life's too short. Like literally, and this is not an exaggeration. I got a text message yesterday afternoon, and someone from our church, a small group leader, just an amazing guy, 3 kids, passed away in his sleep yesterday. And so, like, not an exaggeration. This was literally yesterday. And so it's like there was just, I don't know, it was just hard for me to even like work the rest of the day just hearing about this. And I don't even know him that well, but just an unbelievable guy. But just like thinking about, wow, like life is so short, you know, and life truly is when you have something like that happen literally this week. It's like, oh my gosh, like what really matters now. And so for all
Right.
the times that, to your point, man, it's absolutely retweet that, double down on mission. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't, like, what else are you doing if you don't? Like, if you're not doing that, I just feel like you're going to look back at the end of your career and be like, yeah, I made all this money, but I hated my job. I didn't get, you know, like, I think we all have a stewardship responsibility. Like, we've been given gifts, and I think we're called to steward those. To be good stewards of that, I think means to cultivate it. It means to protect it. It means to pursue it. And to me, it's a huge shame if you look back at the end of your life and you're like, wow, I had these gifts, I had these abilities, but yet I kept them on the sideline. It's like, I don't want that to be the case for myself. And I don't think many people do out there. And so that would be my challenge, is like, man, how can you realize your gift, try to cultivate it, utilize it, research about it, pursue it, and then just like go all in on it, you know? And it might take, you know, it took me 4.5 years of doing it as a side hustle before I could go all in, but that's what it took. Maybe for some people it's a few months, maybe for some people it's 10 years, but what will you do to take a step in that direction?
Man, you hit it. This is like gold. This is gold. I feel like you're just speaking directly to my heart there, man. Like it's
Thanks.
powerful stuff. And I think this is life-changing, transformational information that if this is resonating with you, it's for a reason. It's because you have that desire, and that desire needs to be followed. It was for you to then go and live that purpose. So can you just describe the role of faith in your life and how God has played a part up until now?
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home. I feel like at a young age, I accepted Christ as my savior. And so, yeah, I mean, just again, life doesn't become easy when you're a Christian, and life isn't all this. In some ways, it can get harder. And but I think, you know, God has blessed each one of us uniquely with giftings, with skill sets, with abilities to ultimately give Him glory. But I think, man, just being a Christian obviously changes the way that you do things. It changes the way that maybe you give your money or keep your money, or business decisions, or, you know, at Streamline Books, the way we're leading our company and things like that. So it just changes everything, man. And so, yeah, we could have a whole podcast on just the faithfulness of God and how I've seen that in my life. But man, it's been a huge role. And I think just something that, like, at the end of the day, like, you can try to define your identity and your work, how much money you make,
Mhm.
playing football. But just like you saw in my story, I got cut, right? Like, and you can lose your job, just like mass layoffs that are happening right now. And so
Right.
to have your identity rooted in things that have no foundation, like, you are literally setting yourself up for success. And so, man, uh, yeah, God is good, and just trying to be faithful in what He puts before me each day.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I think that is it all comes from inside, right? And that deeper connection to spiritual oneness and to God. And obviously that can really help in tough situations, but it's also when you're riding the wave and you're on top, is also knowing, like understanding where you want to go with that, because you've got an opportunity as well, and knowing that things can change, and not kind of just thinking it's always going to be the same. So on that, right, it's great to obviously have another author on the show. We've both got books out there. We've both been through the process a number of times of writing books, and just the challenge, the joy, the sweat, the blood, the tears, the hard work, the purpose that comes from writing a book. You have set up a company called Streamline Books. I'd love for you to just talk us through what that is, and then how that can help people.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was out speaking, just like you, a lot of people would come up to me afterwards and say, hey, like, it's awesome that you have a book. I'd love to write one. And I didn't really have anything. I was just kind of like, all right, Johnny, keep working hard, you know, and I didn't really have a resource.
Yeah.
And so what's cool is, long story short, I ended up co-founding a company with a guy named Will Severns out of Kansas City. And we co-founded what's today called Streamline Books. And yeah, man, it's incredible. So in a 16-week process, we get to help authors write, edit, and publish their book. And so, to your point, it's like,
Weeks.
it can be so overwhelming, man. Like, how to you know, where do I start? How do I do this? But man, we've just assembled this team. Any author we work with, you get 3 people. It's like this 3-pronged attack. You get a
Mhm.
project manager, a writer, and an editor. And so those 3 people on your team just help you hit deadlines in the 16 weeks. And then for a lot of people too, that are busy, maybe they're a busy executive or in sales, whatever, they have they kind of have their story up here, but they don't love writing. They don't have the time to write. And so a big part of our process too is the ghostwriting process, which is helping people get their thoughts, which is their thoughts, their writing onto
Mhm.
paper. And we do that through kind of like a podcast style like this. We have, AI transcription that helps us, that the writers will write based off of. So man, it's just so cool I think the heartbeat of the company is we want to help people. Everyone has a message, and
Mhm.
everyone there's someone out there that needs your message, that needs your book, that needs your story. And so we just want to help people tell it. And we just think there's so much news in the world, and news can be exhausting, depressing, exhausting. But it's like, man, when you're able to share the story that you've been through, the things that you've learned, your expertise, there's something really cool about that. And so yeah, man, just know that anyone from your podcast who reaches out to us, we will give them a discount if they end up doing a
Oh,
book with
awesome.
us. So, yeah, if there's anyone, we'll just put a little discount code in there. We'll put Tim Castle in the discount code. But yeah, seriously, if there's anyone that's listening that is interested, we would love to just hear your story and just help you get your message out into the world, because truly it's never been easier than it is today to get your book out there. But it just takes you showing up and doing the work, and bringing a team around you to make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think anyone that this is speaking to right now, hit Alex up. Like, just don't even think about it. Don't question it. Just go with it. And obviously, they're there to help. They're experts that are doing a ton of this stuff every day. And the whole purpose of the company is to help you through the hard bit, and to really get to the good stuff, because that good stuff is going to help other people, as Alex has so clearly identified. Like that. That's awesome, man. I bet that's a rip roaring success as well. I bet that's going really well as a business.
Thanks, man. Well, we're just trying to take it day by day, and just
Mhm,
really focus
mhm.
on just the individuals we get to work with, because it's like they have this story. So it's kind of like helping them, because a lot of people think like, all right, you write a book and you're on the Oprah show the next day, right? But as you
Yeah,
know, as an author, it's like, it doesn't really just work like that. People don't bang down your door when you come out with a book. It's like it's a slow process that you have
it
to put
takes
out there.
time. Yeah.
It takes time, but we do think that a book is the hook. And what I mean by that
Mhm.
is, let's say you're a financial planner. If you write a book on financial literacy or how to build wealth with real estate, it's like you can now use that book as a way to get more clients, speaking engagements. And so, yeah, we just think it's an easy way to do those things. And it can be just a huge kind of like hook for your business in that way.
And I think it goes even back to like integrity, like what you say. I mean, I'm not going to give away too much of the book because I want people to read it, but about long-term success, like the sale, the book is a book about integrity, but there's also these laws within in there
Yeah.
that we don't have to talk about here because I don't want to give away the secrets. But the point is that writing your book, the fact is that yes, it takes a while, but 16 weeks is not a while. But the approach after that to actually make it happen takes some time, and that's really connected to what is your long-term purpose, what is your long-term mission, not taking shortcuts, but understanding that like there's a bigger purpose and value here to be created.
Dude, that's so good, man. You just said it. Yeah, the one of the principles, integrity allows for long-term success, man. Like it's so true, because it's like even in our business with Streamline Books, like there's opportunities we've had to not even necessarily shortcuts, but just like, hey, if we do this, this will save us time in the short term. But it's like, well, wait, we're thinking long term with this thing. Like we want to be
Mm.
helping people write their books 20 years from now, not just this year. And so we're making decisions even as a company where it's like, how can we almost like slow down and think like, okay, vision, how are we now going to approach this thing? And so, man, you're spot on when you say that, because it's so true. It takes that intentionality to say, you know what, mission is front and center. If our
Mhm.
mission is front and center, then like, dude, everything flows from that. But it's like if we get that mission, if that's off, then man, that's when things start to go negatively. And so, man, how can you keep that mission front and center in your business and in your life?
But totally, and like, and that I mean, going back again to the sale, like again, I do love how you've set up the scenario where there's a boss and the boss isn't necessarily the best role model, because that happens a lot too. And we're so easy to judge at the same time and just, oh, well, they're not doing things right. And then actually, when there's $7 million on the table, well, how are we going to handle it? Like, what are we going to do? How are
Yeah.
we going to show up? And like, it really is just, it's huge how integrity helps us once we raise that standard. It, like something you say in the book around it, if you're not showing integrity in some areas, it rubs off on others. And I think
Yeah.
that is just, it's just magic, right? Like that's because it's true, but we don't think about it. We just think, oh, I'm being really awesome. I'm smashing it in these areas and I've got integrity in them. But actually, over here, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
That is so good because I mean, to your point in the book, Tony is like essentially the sales manager over Matt. And like you said, when the 7 million's on the line, it's like Tony's pretty much saying, like, if you don't do this, like you're going to get fired. Like
right?
you're screwing everybody. And in reality, Tony, you'll read in the book what ends up happening to him. It's not great for Tony because he's kind of leading in that way. And so I think, yeah, man, we all can put ourselves in Matt's shoes where it's like someone above you or someone on your team is telling you, well, yeah, it's fine to do this. No one's going to know. And it's almost like in that moment, and I almost feel like in corporate America, it's almost easier to go, almost just like go with the flow of like, well, if they're doing it, okay. And it's like, man, that's not right. And I just think it takes you kind of standing up for some of these things, say, you know what, like, I don't think that's for the long haul going to be the best thing. And so, because you're so right, man, like it does rub off on each area. You can't just, you know, um, man, if you go to ESPN.com right now, if you look at, you know, the sports page, I almost guarantee you one of the headlines would be an integrity issue, right?
Right.
And or someone who made a huge mistake that misrepresented the university or the organization. And it's like, if you look at that person's life, I don't think that they woke up one day and said, you know what, today is the day where I'm gonna screw up my life. And you know, I think there's probably small rationalizations along the way that if you could ask them to trace back to, they would say, yeah, you know what, I was this area of my life. Yeah, I started to kind of not be my best over here, and then over here as well. It's just, it all goes together, man. And you're so right. Sometimes we live as if it doesn't, but then it's like sometimes it these hard times in life that we go through, it makes us really look at ourselves and be like, wow, like I have gotten off track in this area. How can I get back on track in
The
that area of my life?
humbling. Mm. It's the
Yeah.
humbling. Yeah. So what is your life like now in terms of keynote speaker? You're flying all around all the time. Like I even saw that you did a ton of, I mean, when you first started, you did a ton of speeches back to back to back to back. Like you've been through the mill. You've been like, as you said at the beginning of the show, sleeping in airports, doing whatever it takes. Like, is that something that you love? Is that part of it? And yeah, where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we've been really growing Streamline Books. So we have 41 writers who are, you know, just part-time writers, but that are part of Streamline Books. And so as we've grown the company, I think it's kind of, I've just reshifted my focus a little bit. Like I still will always be speaking, but
Mm,
man, like I'm definitely going to be a little more selective because obviously as we're building Streamline Books, I love promoting my own books. I love speaking on my books. I love doing this, but there is something kind of like, I don't know, intoxicating about helping someone else publish their
right.
book. I just think there's something about that where it's like it's way bigger than me. It's like, hey, how can I'll meet someone at a wherever and they're like, well, I want to write a book. And then going from that conversation to then 16 weeks later, it's like I'm, you know, literally holding a copy of their book. This is Julie Nee, who's one of my friends. And it's like it starts with a conversation. And so it's kind of like,
Is that the mirror one?
yeah. So it's like for me, it's like that's it. And so man, like we're having our second child. We're having a baby boy here in about 4 weeks, and so I obviously
Awesome.
won't be traveling much for speaking for the foreseeable future. But yeah, man, this fall will be really busy, but really looking forward to it. And I just think
Cool.
I think even with speaking, man, like you can relate to this. I bet like it's easy for me to look at some other top, you know, big name speakers out there and be like, wow, they're doing 150 gigs a year. Like, wow, they're making millions of dollars and doing great. But going back to the comparison as the thief of joy, it's like, well, wait, I'm married. I'm about to have 2 kids. And I know you have 2 kids as well. It's like, do I want to do 150 a year? No, I don't. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need to do that. And so I think it's a lot of times we compare ourselves to like unrealistic things that maybe aren't even the best fit for us. And I think rather than that, for me, I would just, kind of my goal is 36 a year. And for me, if I can add value in 36 engagements per year, usually it's more than that, but that's just at least a goal. And it's like, that's what works for my family. And that's what works best for what I do. And so, yeah, I think for each person, it's just figuring out like, man, what is it for you? And then what's holding you back from doing it?
That's epic. That's epic, because it allows people to actually do what you've literally stepped out in this podcast. That also is a bit of vulnerability there. Just saying that, like, look, there are people doing things that you could want to aspire to do, but then when you map it back to your life to here, would it even make sense? Would it even make you happy? Would it even bring you joy or fulfillment? No, it wouldn't, right? So therefore, that's not actually anything to do with where we're going. Do you have like a motto or a mantra that you hold by in life, or is it more just values and principles and deeper sense?
I would say values and principles. I think a kind of a life verse that I've always thought about, Proverbs 3:5 and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not in your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. So that's kind of a verse that I cling to. But yeah, man, I just think it's humbly each day waking up, trying to get in the word for me and refocus my vision for the day, and so I can go out and try to be used. So
I love it. That's the stewardship piece and the calling. And even I love that you articulate around the fact that you were working a job and then doing the speaking and doing other things at the same time. And then you got the heart palpitations. And then obviously things have led you to this point, right? You've gone all in on helping others. And now you're at a point where you're touching lives through other people so that it gets even bigger, right? The writing books is, it's the best feeling in the world when you hold that book for the first time after however long it's taken. Right. 16 weeks though is good. Like if I could write a book I might come and use Streamline next time then, because 16 weeks is what I'm all about. I've got 3 on the go now and I need to get them done. So 16 weeks. Yeah, let's go.
Hey, we might need to talk after this. But yeah, man, that's the thing, is just the accountability. It's like we talk to people all the time who have said, I've had this book idea for 5 years. And we're going 5 years, like you could have published 3 books in that time. And the best part is you could be out speaking and sharing the message of those books. Like if I had to sit on a book idea for 5 years, I would be on to the next book idea, right? Like I'd be on to the next thing. And so, man, I think that's just an encouragement for your listeners. It's like, what is holding you back? Like bring experts around you. Yeah, you're going to pay for obviously just any service to get your book done, but it's like, pay people that have done it, find, whether it's us or other people, find people that truly care about your story and aren't just trying to make money in book publishing. They truly care about like, hey, what's your purpose? What's your why? What's a win for you doing this book? And I think when you start asking those questions, you'll find a great fit.
I think that's super, super important, right? Because there is a lot, it's a big market. There's a lot of different lenses that you could have on publishing and books. And I'm sure and through experience, you really need someone that knows your story and wants to put your story out there and really understand what you said. Like where are you going with this? Like what's the end goal for this? Because knowing that at the beginning is really going to help. So thank you for sharing that with the listeners. I think that's really important. And there'll be tons of people here that's making sense for. So that's brilliant. One last question then, Alex, on this was it intentional to place Randy, the pizza owner, and make him sort of look like not like the business owner that he was up front? Because like appearances can be deceiving. Was that kind of like the play there, or was it kind of just because that really stood out to me that this, you could see him giving advice and training people within the pizza shop, and it's really cool place.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. You picked up on that. So what's really cool about this, if you're ever in Springfield, Illinois, there's actually a Dylan's Pizza, and it's actually owned by a guy named Randy. And so full circle, man. So Randy Sutherland is a mentor of mine. He mentored me when I was in high school. And so literally he owns Dylan's Pizza. And so when we were thinking about the storyline, I was like, oh man, it has to be Randy. And so yeah, that's kind of why he's in there. But absolutely, man, to your point, it's and what's cool to tie in as well with John Gordon is that John Gordon was one of the first people to ever have a Moe's restaurant in Florida. He owned 2 or 3 of them. And the reason why we said kind of table wiper, it was kind of like what Randy was doing in that scene of the book, is because John said when he owned these Moe's restaurants, he would be wiping down the tables, but people would just treat him like an employee. They'd be like, "Oh, you need to clean," they wouldn't know he owned 3 of the
Right.
stores.
Yeah.
And so his point was just like, how are you treating the person who is wiping down the tables? In this case, it turns out to be Randy, who owns all these different restaurants and is
Yeah.
mega wealthy, right?
Yeah.
But so I think, man, that was the tie-in. So yeah, man, homework for you whenever you're in Springfield, Illinois, look up Dylan's
Go
Pizza.
find Randy.
I'm telling you, man, it's the best pizza out there. So
Okay, I'm gonna go to Dylan's to see Randy in Illinois. Yeah, for sure. That's it, man. That's it. Well, that's a big lesson, right? We can all take something from that, because I think there's so many occasions, whether we mean to or not, where we're just not the same as if we thought we were speaking to a CEO or someone that could help us, or someone that we need to sell for $7 million, or
yeah,
it just changes. And it's just to take a little check on that and just be like, look, how do we want to show up with everybody? And as if, that's integrity, right? That's where it
yeah,
starts there. So thank you
man.
for sharing that lesson. And thank you for this. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for getting an early start on your morning and taking us through the sale. It is a joy and a pleasure. And I'm really humbled to have you on the show, because the sale has spoken to me, and I'm sure it will speak to others. So I really want people to go out and to buy the book, and to also start writing their own book with your company.
Yeah, Tim, super humbled to be here, man. I appreciate you reading the book, saying all that. You have an awesome podcast and following on social media. So yeah, I'm humbled and excited that we're connected, excited to learn from you, man. And yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
No, it was a joy.